Good day everyone, I'm Eliza Marisi Alonde of Y1PMG03 Naphtali, and I will be discussing the Article 1179 and 1180 of the Law on Obligations and Contracts. First, let's talk about the Article 1179. Under the Article 1179, it is said that every obligation whose performance does not depend upon a future or uncertain event or upon a past event unknown to the parties is demandable at once. Every obligation which contains a resolutory condition shall also be demandable without prejudice to the effects of the happening of the event. The first sentence actually talks about the pure obligation. A pure obligation is one which is not subject to any condition and no specific date is mentioned for its fulfillment and is therefore immediately demandable. For example, Jeannie promised to deliver the ordered shoes to Lily. Because there is no condition and no specific date is mentioned for its fulfillment, therefore, Lily can demand for the delivery of the shoes. Another example is Mr. Nicolas obliges to pay Mrs. Sanchez 30,000 pesos. The obligation is immediately demandable if there is no condition and no date is mentioned for its fulfillment. The second sentence of Article 1179 actually talks about the conditional obligation. A conditional obligation is one whose consequences are subject in one way or another to the fulfillment of a condition. Condition is a future and uncertain event upon the happening of which the effectivity or extinguishment of an obligation subject to its depends. Let's proceed to the characteristics of a condition. First is the future and uncertain. In order to constitute an event a condition, it is not enough that it be future, it must also be uncertain. The first paragraph of Article 1179 obviously uses the disjunctive or between future and uncertain to distinguish pure obligation from both the conditional obligation and one with a period. Be that as it may, the word or should be and. Second is the past but unknown. A condition may refer to a past event unknown to the parties. If it refers to a future event, both its very occurrence and the time of such occurrence must be uncertain. Otherwise, it is not a condition. A condition must not be impossible. There are two principal kinds of condition. First is the suspensive condition, or the condition precedent or condition antecedent. It is one the fulfillment of which will give rise to an obligation. In other words, the demandability of the obligation is suspended until the happening of a future and uncertain event which constitutes the condition. Second is the resolutory condition or the condition subsequent. It is one of the fulfillment of which will extinguish an obligation already existing. Now, the question is, when is obligation demandable at once? An obligation is demandable at once. First is when it is pure. Second is when it is subject to a resolutory condition. And third is when it is subject to a resolutory period. And now let's talk about the Article 1180. Under the Article 1180, it is said that when the debtor binds himself to pay when his means permit him to do so, the obligation shall be deemed to be one with a period, subject to the provision of Article 1197. As what I have said in the Article 1180, if an obligation is with a period, it is future and certain. If an obligation is a conditional obligation, it is future and uncertain. The payment here does not depend upon the will of the debtor. It is the time of the fulfillment of the obligation. The question is, when is the obligation demandable? A period is a future uncertain event upon the arrival of which the obligation subject to it either arises or extinguished. The debtor promises to pay when his means permit him to do so. The obligation shall be deemed to be one with the period. In this case, what depends upon the debtor's will is not whether he should pay or not, for indeed, he binds himself to pay. What is left only to his will is the duration of the period. If the debtor and the creditor cannot agree as to the specific time for payment, the court shall fix the same on the application of either party. In other cases, as when the debtor binds himself to pay, little by little, as soon as possible, from time to time, as soon as I have the money, at any time I have the money, in partial payments, when I am in a position to pay. That's it for my report. I hope that you learned something. Thank you and God bless.